Hello everybody, my name is Walter and this is episode 19 of Redstone Commands Series. In this episode I want to cover the item command. So the item command is somewhat similar to the give command or the clear command insofar that it is used to directly manipulate the content of inventory slots. On the other hand, it's much more versatile since you're not limited to player inventory, but can use this also to manipulate the inventory of blocks or mobs. And on the other hand, it's much more precise because you manipulate directly specified inventory slots, which makes this extremely powerful, but also a bit challenging to use. Now, before I get to the actual command, let me quickly cover item modifiers. Those are .json files you might find in data packs in a subfolder called item modifiers. And those item modifiers can then be used with the item command. Depending on what item modifier you are talking about, you can manipulate many things about the content of the inventory slot. You can manipulate how many items are in that stack. You can manipulate the NBT data directly or copy it from somewhere else. You can manipulate the enchantment and so on and so on. As an example, I have this function here, which is, or this item modifier fill player head. And this can be used to customize a player head. So I have an embedded function which basically calls this modifier. And now you can see I have in my inventory my own head. So just one rather interesting use of this command or of item modifiers. And with that, let's get to the command. So I've split this on the 3 pages since the command provides 3 slightly different functionalities. The first is modifying an already existing item in the inventory slot. For that, you start with item, followed by modify, followed by the target. You can either target a block, followed by the coordinates of that block, or you can target a single or multiple entities. So you start with entity, and then you specify the target. You can use player names here. You can use the unique identifiers of entities via the autocomplete function, for example, or you can use target selectors. Following that, you will specify the item slot you want to manipulate. This is either just the index number. Those usually start at 0 at the top left and then go left to right, top to bottom. Special inventory slots like the armor slots of a player or the main or the offhand have their own number that is not continuous with that. The ender chest also, for example, has a slightly different number area or range since it's a special inventory. If you're interested in that, you can find a link in the description to the Wiki article that contains a table with all of the numbers. Besides of the pure index number, pretty much all of those inventory slots have a special name. So the offhand, for example, has not only the number 99, it also has the name weapon point offhand. It's a bit easier to read in a command that way. Weapon point main hand, for example, is a dynamic inventory slot, you could say, because it's the inventory slot you're currently holding in your main hand. So any of the 9 inventory slots in your hotbar, depending on which one is currently selected. Some are also a name plus a number, so hotbar point 0 would be the first slot in your hotbar, for example. And finally, you specify the item modifier, which I talked about just a few moments ago, that you want to apply to that item. So do you want to change the number of those items? Do you want to customize the heads? Do you want to change the NBT data? And so on and so on. As an example, let me quickly get this in my main hand. This one here would be modifying my main hand item, and the item modifier in the background is incrementing by 1. And you can see now I have 2 heads and 3 heads and 4 heads and so on and so on. So pretty simple actually. The second functionality is directly replacing the item in the inventory slot. So we start with item followed by replace this time. Then again, we specify the target, either block or entity. Next, we specify again the item slot we want to manipulate. And then we continue with followed by the item we want to place in that specific inventory slot. We can optionally add NBT data to that, and we can also optionally specify a number between 1 and 64. This is very similar to the give command. Here, as an example, I'm giving or putting in my offhand a carrot with a stick with some additional NBT data. And if I do that, now you can see I have a carrot and a stick with some additional lore information and tags and so on. So pretty interesting somewhat. And finally, last functionality is also the mode replace. But now we are basically copying from a different item slot. So we start with item, then replace, then the target block or entity slot. Now instead of with, we have from. And now we specify a second target, either block or entity. If you're talking about an entity, now it must be a single entity, which is the main difference to up here. Then again, we specify the slot we want to copy from. And finally, we can further modify or apply an item modifier to the copied item. So here, as an example, I would copy the item I have in my main hand into my head armor slot. So to make this more interesting, let's take, well, let's see, what would be an interesting thing? Yeah, let's go with the spyglass. So now I have the spyglass in my main hand, and now I copy this into my head slot. And yeah, looks as stupid as I thought it would. And with that, we have reached the end of this episode about the item command. I hope you enjoyed it, and well, see ya.